Hello and welcome to tutorial number 4 in the Python tutorial series of videos. I made a slight change to the naming conventions that we're going to be using. My original plan was to have different videos starting 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then change almost like version numbers for games. I didn't like the way that was looking out, so we're just going to do a normal numbering system. So this is going to be video number 4, and the purpose of video number 4 is to look at some different functions. It's an introduction to Python functions. The two functions we'll be looking at are the print and input statement, which are very common Python functions. We'll also be looking at the str, or string function, the int, or integer function, the float function, and the type function. So when all is said and done here, we should have 6 different functions that we're able to use in our programs, and one of the other changes you might see is the window now, we've got 2 windows open instead of just 1. Everything we've been doing up to this point has been on the Python shell. And that's that window over here on the left-hand side. And the Python shell is a good place to test code and get your feet wet, but the problem with Python shell is everything is executed immediately. So if I were to type in x equals 56, that happens immediately when I press enter. If I were to type in the string hello, I press enter and it immediately returns hello. When we're writing programs though, we're going to want to be able to write the programs and just have them run when we execute the programs. So the way I did that was I just went File, New Window, and I opened up a new window here. I situated it on the right hand side of my desktop. And this is from this point forward where we'll be programming all of the code that we're going to be inputting. Now there's some, I don't want to say limitations to this because they're not limitations, but there's some things that are going to make it a little bit different than working in the Python shell. And the big difference is things only happen when we run a program. So to give you an example of that right here, let's say I'm going to set a variable y and I'm going to equal 76. So y is equal to the value of 76. I'm going to run my program. Now you can go up to run and hit run module. The hotkey for that is F5, and I definitely recommend using the hotkey. So I'm going to hit F5, and it's going to tell me that my file needs to be saved. Now if you haven't saved it before, it will prompt you to input a file name. I've already named mine test.py. So I'm just going to save it and update it from what I had and execute the program. Now it opens up this window right here. And you can see nothing happened on the left-hand side. It just restarted shell, and I've got the 3 carets. But if I type y is equal to a value of 76. This program executed. All Python programs execute top to bottom, and they have no natural looping. So once they reach the bottom, they're not going to go back up and run any other sorts of codes. Y equals 76, and I can see that over here on the shell. Now if I want to add another value over here and I want to say z equals 45, I've got that over here in my program window. If I come back over to the shell and I type z, I'm going to get a name z is not defined error. The reason for that is it's not that I didn't program z. It's in here correctly. There's no syntax error. But I haven't run this program yet. When you make changes to your program over here in the window, you have to run it again by either selecting Run Module or hitting F5. You'll be prompted to save the file again. It will always restart the shell. I can see that because of the restart message. And now, y equals 76, z equals 45. And if I had another value in here and say x equals 14, just like with the last time, if I hit x, I get a name is not defined error. That's because I have to run and execute this code again. When I do that, it restarts shell. Y, z, and x all have values in them. Okay, so with that out of the way, we need to start using functions in our programs. I've got this program that I wrote up here. And let's say I wanted to echo let's see, hello. I want my program to write hello. So over in the shell, I would just use my delimiters. I would put hello, and when I hit enter, it would print hello. When I just type the string in the window on the right and run it, see, I'm not getting any return value from Python. Over here on the left, my y, z, and x still exist, but what about that hello? That hello wasn't saved to a variable. I have no way to access hello again. If I type hello over here in the shell, it will echo hello, but I want my program to print hello every time I run it. That's where we're going to use the print function. It is by far the most basic of all the Python commands you're going to see, and it's going to be executed simply by typing the word print. When I type print, it turns a purplish color. That's my code that I have typed a function in Python. And when you use a function in Python, you always need to surround that function with parentheses. So if I type print, open parentheses, hello, with the string delimiters around it, and run the program, I can see my program is now echoing hello in the shell. Now y, z, and x aren't echoing, but I can easily print them as well. I can say print y, z, and x. That's going to print all the numbers next to one another. You'll notice they're separated by commas. When I use commas in my print statements, Python puts a standard space between them. And you'll also notice I didn't put the delimiters around y, z, and x. That's because I want to print the variables y, z, and x. I want to print the value that those variables point to, and not the letters y, z, and x. If I wanted to print the letters y, z, and x, I would need to use the string y, the string z, and the string x. And when I run that program, it prints y, z, and x. There's a big difference between the variable y, z, and x and the strings y, z, and x. Now, if you're coming from Python 2, one big change in the print statement was in Python 2 or earlier, you did not need the parentheses. So I could type print hello, and that command right there was a perfectly legitimate use of the function in Python 2. However, in Python 3, I'm going to get an invalid syntax error. If you see that, that just means you forgot to put parentheses around your print statement, and when you do that, it should execute correctly. All right, so that's all well and good. I want to go ahead and erase this code here. I'm not going to use that. I use that for an example of the print statement. So I'm going to print just a standard introduction to my program. I'm going to say print hello world. It's a very common first thing to write in programming. I'm going to print a blank line. Print with an open and closed parentheses is simply going to be a carriage return. Now there's different ways to do that, but for right now, we're just going to print a return statement there. And I'm going to ask a question, how are you doing today? Now that's all well and good, and when I run this program, it prints hello world, how are you doing today? That's great, but that makes for a really boring program. At this point right here with the print statement, I can pre-print all the messages that I want. The reason programs are often fun, the reason people use computers, is because they can interact with the programs in some way. If that's a video game, if that's an application, every good program has some kind of user interaction. Otherwise, it's just a static video. Python does have a function that allows us to take input from a user, and that function is the input function. Just like when I type print, input turns into that purplish color, and that lets me know that Python recognizes it as a function. If you're familiar with Python 2, the command in Python 2 for input was raw input. Raw input isn't going to work for you in Python 3, so it's just an input statement. And I might ask the user something like, what is your name? And we'll run this program and see what happens over in the shell. Now over in the shell, down here on the bottom left, it printed hello world, it printed my carriage return, and it asked how I was doing, then it asked what my name was. When Python encounters an input statement, it's going to pause. It's going to pause the execution of the program until the user enters something. So in this case, I'm going to write Steve, and the program's done. If I had another statement down here that said, I like your hat, and I run this program, it's going to print everything down to what is your name, and then Python's just going to hang up here. It's not going to do anything until it gets some sort of input. After I type my name, now it will execute the print statement, I like your hat. But it's important to know that input statements are going to pause the input or the execution of your program until the user does something. Now, in this case right here, the program is executed, and I have no idea where the name Steve was stored. I typed it in, the program executed, but that input statement isn't storing the value anywhere. Traditionally, you will find variables set to the input statement. So in this case, I might want to name a variable name, and the name is going to equal input, what is your name? Now when I execute this program, it asks, what is your name? I type in Steve, it prints I like your hat, but I have assigned the input for what is your name to the variable name. If I were to type in name now, I can see that name refers to a value of Steve. Now I can do something with that. Now that I have a variable named Steve, maybe I want to personalize this print statement. Now what we did in lesson 1.3 was looked at how to add variables and how to add them together and how to concatenate them. And so what I might want to do down here in my print statement is print name, comma, I like your hat. When Python encounters this, it's going to print the variable name, and then it's going to print I like your hat. We'll execute this program. What is your name? Steve. It says, Steve, I like your hat. When it concatenates the string, it's not going to add any punctuation by default, and maybe I want it to say Steve, comma, I like your hat. So I'm going to put a comma there, execute the program again. This is what is your name? Steve. It says, Steve, I like your hat. Now there's a space here between Steve and the comma that I don't like. Remember when we did concatenation in lesson 1.3, we used pluses. In a print statement, I can use a comma, and it will put a space in and concatenate these two together. If I want to get rid of that space, instead of using a comma, I'm going to use the plus sign. That plus sign will concatenate these strings together, and like we looked at in 1.3, it's not going to add any spaces, it's not going to add any characters. And so when I execute this, it should say Steve with a comma immediately following I like your hat. What is your name? Steve. And it prints Steve, I like your hat. All right, so in its most basic form, that is the print and input statement. I want to create just a program real quick so that we can summarize what we've talked about in lesson 4. So I'm going to open up a new window over here, and I'm going to move it to the right-hand side so I can still see my shell. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to call it test2.py, test2.py. And what I want my program to do is ask the user for their name, ask the user to input their location, and maybe ask them a question about, I'll just say, how many Coke Zeros they've had in the day. Now there's a number of different ways to accomplish any task in programming. Depending on your programming style and what you want to do, the way you arrange commands, you could probably write the same program 1,000 different ways. So this example right here is going to use a slightly different technique than what we talked about previously in this video, but the end result is going to be the same. So I'm going to start with a print statement, and that print statement is going to ask, what is your name? The question mark. And instead I'm going to have the input statement, input, and I'm just going to have the input statement be a colon. Now when I run this program, See, it says, what is your name? Now, instead of typing it on the same line as what is your name, the input statement's actually down on the bottom left, and I type my name, and to me that looks a little bit cleaner. I prefer that method. I hit enter. My program's working okay. That's another habit to get into. You can see right here, it's a fairly basic program I'm writing, but after every single line of code or every significant amount of code, it's worth it just to run your program again and make sure that you didn't make any errors. Now, one error that I made here is I don't know what that input statement is referring to. I forgot to set it equal to a variable. So I'm going to fix that problem now. And I'm going to type name equals input and then the colon and enter. Now I'm going to print a blank line and I'm going to ask the user, where are you located at? And I'm going to set a variable location equal to input colon. Now this is going to ask the user where you located at, and it will store their response in a variable called location. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out. I'm going to press F5 to run it. What is your name? Steve. Where are you located at? I'm in Arizona. And the program stops executing there because there's no more lines of code. I'm going to add one more carriage return. I'm going to add another print statement. How many Coke Zeros have you had today? I'm going to get input and I'm going to store that in a variable Coke 0. And so now I've asked my user 3 questions and I've stored the response to each question in a variable. Name is located in name, location's located in location. That's a mouthful. And the number of Coke Zeros the user has drank is located in the variable Coke 0. I'm going to write a string that concatenates that all together. So I'm going to say print. And the first thing I guess I want to say is my username. And I'm going to add that to comma. You are located in, and I'm going to put a space plus location. Now I want a period at the end of this, so I'm just going to add plus the string of period. And so what this line is going to do is print name, you are located in, and then give the location and add a period to the end of that statement. I then want a second statement to say you have had add Coke 0, and that's just going to be a number because my user's inputting only a number. Let me say Coke Zeros today. When I close my parentheses, I can see the entire thing is highlighted, letting me know my print statement is complete. I'm going to run this program and see how it works. What is your name? My name is Steve. Where are you located? I'm located in Arizona. And how many Coke Zeros have I had today? The legitimate answer is 7. I've had 7 cans of Coke today. And it's going to print the message, Steve, you are located in Arizona. You have had 7 Coke Zeros today. And I might even play with the output a little bit, because what if you don't have any? I'm going to put parentheses around zeros just in case my user is named Martin and they're located in Florida and they've only had 1 Coke Zero today. So grammatically, you've had 1 Coke Zeros. That's all there is to print and input statements, though. Remember to save your input statements to a variable so you can access them again later. You don't have to have the input statement include the question. You can include that on a separate line, but in large part the input statement is going to function just like a print statement. The same rules apply to a print statement as do the input statement, except the input statement is going to pause the execution of your program. Now that's going to be enough for the print and input section of this. Now there's still 2 topics that I think are closely related to this that I want to talk about, but I'm going to do those in subsequent videos. I want to look at different data types using the type command, the type function, the float function, the int function, and the string function. And I think that will be our next video. It's either going to be that or escape codes. And escape codes are ways for us to print backslashes and put in tabs and print non-printing characters, or characters that would be somewhat difficult to print in other circumstances. So the next two things we're going to be doing is escape characters and some more functions. Once we do that, the way the videos are going to work, or at least I'd like to see them work, is once you have a good enough base of functions and commands that you can use in Python, I'd like to end each video with a challenge or a program that you should be able to do using the skills that we've learned up until that particular video. And we're probably going to start that in about 3 or 4 videos. In about 3 or 4 videos, you'll have enough of a basis in Python to write some pretty interesting programs, although they'll be simple and text-based. If you have any questions about this, if you have any comments, please go ahead and leave them. I'll help you out any way I can. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next time, and have a great day.